I did all of these things, and then I kind of like I felt like yes, everything was working, but I also didn't own any of it, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
I was like an employee. I was getting paid by multiple people. So I was like killing it. I was making a lot of money, but like I felt like a hamster on a wheel kind of where like the label was paying me, each nightclub was paying me,
Mhm.
the app was paying me, like you know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah.
I
Like
was
you
like
felt like a floater, like for lack of a better word, like you didn't have a home.
yeah, yeah. And so I was like, I feel like the next step is like I need to leave and like start
Yeah.
my own company and build it up myself. That's what I felt like. Especially some of the things I did have equity in like the app or whatever, but like the music stuff specifically, I was just an employee, right? So I was making good money, but I didn't own any of the records and stuff like that. And so I was like, I either stay here and keep doing it and then eventually get fired because one of the artists I bring in doesn't hit, or I just bite the bullet and leave now and start my own company.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Adeptus On-Air. I am again your host, Mike Hoffman, and today I'm joined by Connor Treacy. Connor, how are you today?
How's it going, Mike? Let's
Appreciate you.
oh, I'm
Appreciate
excited.
you coming on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate it.
I like being on the East Coast talking to some West Coast people. I feel like we're making the country a little smaller when we do this. But Connor's an LA-based talent agent, talent management company. He runs dealing with music, culture, events, civic life. You represent artists. You help them to develop career strategies and kind of produce some kind of cool events. But just talk to me first about you and how did you get into this side of entertainment?
Yeah, so I started in events first. So started like around the time I was like 19.
Mhm.
And so I, started off small. I was just like a tennis coach making maybe like I don't know, like 30, $40 an hour or something in like that ballpark.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
using that money basically to like put together my own events. So I would, go on Google, but reach out to like an artist manager, book the artist, and then rent out either like a house or a downtown LA warehouse or like a 18 plus like nightclub. And that's
yeah.
kind of how it started. And it was like mainly like 500 to 1,000 capacity
Mhm.
kind of spaces and stuff like that.
But still nice size. If it's small, but still nice venues.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, they were pretty big, and I was doing
Yeah.
that like probably until I was about like 21, and then fell kind of into like the Hollywood like celebrity 21 plus
Yeah.
nightclub scene, and then became more like switched from me having to put up all my own money and bring like 500 or 1,000 people to I was just getting paid a flat fee, and I would bring like celebrities or table spenders or
Yeah.
cool or important people or like you know what I mean, and that's kind of like what
VIPs.
yeah you know
It's a great big step, but how do you go from tennis coach to events? Like something what triggered that thought process for you?
um I guess like the first event I did was on my actual birthday, and somebody just like let me do a party in their backyard.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and when I was like and I just kind of liked how it felt, maybe I guess, like putting it together, the whole thing. And then I kind of just kept it going from there. And then like they started moving very fast once I kind of, started doing it. I would say by like that March, I already like did like a mansion party in Beverly Hills that
Mhm.
went viral,
Yeah.
like millions of views. And then from there, I was like booking some like pretty big artists by that summertime. So in Hollywood, 18 plus, like 1,000 capacity, 500 capacity. Like, so it was, I guess, something where I fell into it kind of randomly, but then I noticed like very fast that it was like getting motion. So
Mm.
yeah.
What did you want to do? Because obviously this wasn't like, hey, I want to do this when I grow up, because you kind of fell into it. So what was your thought process on where you wanted your career to go?
Uh, I grew up as a competitive tennis player. So I guess to rewind a little bit, I was originally like a national judo champion when I was like 10 years old or something. I was like, yeah, I won the whole thing. And then I qualified for the Junior Olympics, quit. And then the next day I had like a tennis pamphlet on my bed from my dad. And so then from there on, I was like a competitive tennis player. Like it would be like every day after school, I'd play for like, 2 to 4 hours. I'd work out before school. And then every other weekend I had tournaments. Like that was kind of the vibe. So I guess like in elementary, middle school, high school, like tennis was always kind of the thing, but like
Yeah.
I never, I guess like was on par to become Nadal or something like that. I like definitely was in the crew of people where some people did end up going pro or some people
Yeah.
became top D1 players. I was, a nationally ranked D3 player, so I
Okay.
ended up being like pretty good. I was
Yeah.
like, but I didn't have like my thing in high school. I felt like,
Right.
there's always like some people where like they're the singer or
Yeah, of course.
they're the this or they have the clothing brand. I never really like knew what my thing was, and then I just randomly fell into the events, and then
Yeah.
something
Interesting.
just clicked with it where I just was like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, so something you said interesting. So you were a high level judo,
Yeah.
and then you qualified, and then
Yeah.
you stopped. Like,
Yeah.
what was it? Just because you were burned out at such a young age, you stopped enjoying it? Because obviously, people work to get to that level. Then when they're there, they oftentimes want to compete, and you took a totally different path, which is interesting because you then excelled at the next thing. But what was the thought process for you to kind of switch gears?
Um, I don't know if my dad's not like a stage dad. I wouldn't say that. My dad's very involved and like very intense, and so he kind
Okay.
of like around the time I was probably like 4, like I just fell into judo, and then it was serious. You're fighting people every weekend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Judo's basically just like wrestling. Like for people
Yeah.
that don't understand, it's basically just wrestling. That's what it is. It's like throws, pins, chokes, arm bars. But when you're under 18, you can't do chokes and you can't do
Certain
arm
things
bars.
you can't do, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's basically just you're grappling with people and then you're throwing them on the ground and pinning them, and then it's based off points or if you can
Yeah.
pin them long enough. And so, yeah, it was just one of those things. Like I don't know. I would always get like really nervous before I was about to fight someone, and then like he made a deal with me. He's like, if you end up like doing the nationals and winning, like you can quit if you want, and I did, and I quit.
Well,
But
listen, you didn't have a passion for it, and there's nothing wrong with that at such a young age. Yeah.
well, you want to know what's weird is even back then, this was like, by the way, the UFC wasn't like big back then. Right? I'm
You're right.
33.
You're right. Yeah.
So yeah, and so I even back then was thinking, I was like, where does this lead?
Right.
Like
Right.
if say I do go to the Olympics and become like a huge like because I even knew back then I don't think Olympians get paid that much, right? Or there's some cases where
Well,
it's like
Olympians, I don't believe you get paid for being an Olympian. They get
yeah,
paid for
it's brand
what it
deals and
leads to,
right.
endorsements, opening doors, that kind of thing.
Right. And so I even kind of knew back then, like with judo, I was like, judo's not like basketball, where if you go to the NBA, you get like a multi-million. I even back then was just like, I don't know where this really leads. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, the pressure of like having to win every time, and you have to like keep weight, and you have to
Yeah.
train every day and fight people. Like I just kind of was like, I'm 10, like I want to watch Yu-Gi-Oh! Like I don't,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. But clearly the one thing that you established, which will get back to your career in a minute,
Yeah.
is to excel at anything. You got to have an awesome work ethic. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't reach that level without it, and then you decide that's not where you want to be, and
Yeah.
then you pick up a sport that you're based upon a pamphlet sitting on your bed, and then you
Yeah.
excel at that too. So I do believe there's an aspect of some people are just gifted and just born with athletic talent, and clearly you had that, but that only takes you so far. So kind of talk about, and I'm sure it carried over into your business now. Like I said, talk about your work ethic and how that's been such an important part of your life.
Yeah. Look, I don't think that like I'm like a LeBron James like style like superstar athlete type person, but what I will say is like from a very young age, like since I was probably 4 years old, I'm used to like training hours a day or fighting
Right.
people or like, and so I'm just used to doing things that like normal people probably wouldn't want to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Even when like I was in college and I was on the tennis team, I was also in school, but I also was like fully throwing events and had my own company. And like there would be some times where like I had to be out at an event till like 2 in the morning when it closes, and then I had to like make sure that everyone got paid and this and that. And like by the time I got back to Thousand Oaks, it could sometimes be like 4 or 5 in the morning, and then I'd have like a sectional tennis
Right.
match at like 6 or 7 in the morning, and I'd play
Yeah.
off. You get what I'm saying? And so I'm used to operating on like that type of program for ever since I can remember, kind of.
Yeah, yeah,
So
which is amazing. So
yeah,
now with your career, that same discipline that you had as a younger person, and obviously you're still very young now.
yeah.
How do you think that's helped you build your business?
I think it's given me the ability to do multiple things at once so that over time, maybe it just gives me more and more of an advantage over my like competitors, I guess. I mean, there could be the opposite argument where, maybe I could have been like a better college tennis player if I would have gone all in on that rather than had
Yeah.
three things going at once. But like, for example, since like 2020, like I basically went back to school and finished everything and just finished my MBA at USC. Like
Mhm.
I finished that like 3 weeks ago, but during that time I opened a nightclub. It was a huge hit. I did that for like 3 years. I also like was involved with like a few other companies, was like managing artists, working on records,
Yeah.
built out like a full kind of like political like event type lane as well. Because I'm used to kind of doing three things at once, like
Yeah.
working at this type of speed, it almost feels weird if I'm not working at this type of speed because then I'm just like sitting in my room, like on my couch, like what am I doing? Like if I'm just doing one thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Listen, yeah. I mean, kind of goes to my point. Is that's your makeup?
Yeah.
Your makeup is to have your mind while you're on one thing, also focusing on the next thing. It's a bad thing when you're not doing the current thing effectively, but clearly, what you're doing effectively, you're also thinking about the next thing or the other thing.
For me, it kind of takes the pressure off of everything else because it's like if I'm only focused on one thing and I need that one thing to work, then I
Yeah,
like overthink it. Whereas I feel like I operate better when there's like so much stuff going on that like I'm not overthinking things. I'm just making quick decisions. And by the way, not everything I do works. There's, certain artist projects that don't work or certain ventures that don't work, but
yeah,
typically there's always like one thing out of the chaos that hits each time,
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's kind of like what works for me.
So, but you also recognize that certain things don't work. So, how do you take those? And I hate using the word failures, but for the discussion purpose, we'll say failures. How do
Yeah.
you take those failures, learn from them, refocus, readjust, whatever word you want to use, and then use that failure to better you in some other way?
I think you need the failures, and the failures help make you more efficient. You know what I mean? So it's like what sometimes could take me like a year or two to like figure out, now I could know in a day or two because
Yeah,
I've already failed doing that. Like before, like if I was managing an artist like back in the day, like especially when I was at the label and stuff, you have to like fly them out and do this and hang out with them and bring them
yeah,
around. Now it's like I could manage like 5 artists and never even meet them in person because I just talk to them on Zoom because they live in different countries and this and that. So it like speeds up everything a lot more.
Can you think of one in specific disappointment, failure in your life that was the best failure because that led to the biggest net benefit afterwards?
Um, One of them was like I would say like 2019 was probably one of my biggest years.
Okay.
I had like developed this like rock artist named Youngblood basically from scratch when I was at Universal Music Group. And so, you know, by 2019 he had a song come out with like Halsey and Travis Barker, and he was like doing like I think some of the shows probably were like around like 20 to 50,000 people and stuff like that,
Wow.
like big festivals and stuff like that. And then I'd like launched this like tech app. I did an event for it. Like LeBron James came. I was like working at two different nightclubs during that time. Oh, and then I was managing this producer. I got him placed on like Dua Lipa's album, and that ended up
Mhm.
winning a Grammy afterwards. But
Wow.
I did all of these things, and then I kind of like I felt like yes, everything was working, but I also didn't own any of it, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
I was like an employee. I was getting paid by multiple people. So I was like killing it. I was making a lot of money, but like I felt like a hamster on a wheel kind of where like the label was paying me, each nightclub was paying
Mhm.
me, the app was paying me. Like you know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah.
I
Like you
was like
felt like a floater, like for lack of a better word, like you didn't have a home.
yeah, yeah. And so I was like, I feel like the next step is like I need to leave and like start
Yeah.
my own company and build it up myself. That's what I felt like, especially some of the things I did have equity in like the app or whatever, but like the music stuff specifically, I was just an employee, right? So I was making good money, but I didn't own any of the records and stuff like that. I either stay here and keep doing it and then eventually get fired because one of the artists I bring in doesn't hit, or I just bite the bullet and leave now and start my own company. And so I left. And you know, I was trying to build out my own management company. I tried to sign like one or two acts. It just didn't pan out. COVID hit. Basically went from 2019 being like the hottest year of all time for me to all of a sudden I went from like a bunch of income to zero
Yeah.
because COVID hit. You know what I mean? Because I was entertainment, so everything got hit. There was no
Well,
nightclub.
that's the thing. I talked to a lot of people on the podcast who are in the entertainment world, and I have some other clients as well, besides people from the podcast that are event planners, and
Yeah,
those were the industries that just got just brutalized. I mean, even small actors who were doing bit parts. I mean, production just stopped, and event planners. There weren't events for a year, and no one knew when it was going to end. So the events that they'd already planned suddenly weren't happening. So they lost all that work they'd already done, and no one was booking anything down the road because they didn't know when things were going to open.
right. Yeah, I luckily had such a big year that it wasn't like I felt like this ship was gonna sink, but it was just like, all right,
Yeah,
like how do I like float through this and like not bleed? You know,
yeah, yeah.
that was more the vibe. But I didn't, to your point, like I didn't know if it was gonna last a year or five
Right,
years or like what
right.
was going on. So that's that. And the crazy thing is, I always think about. I don't know if I'm not like a negative person or a pessimist, but I always like think of these things. I missed the '08 wave because I was like probably in like 10th grade or something when that
Yeah,
happened. So
yeah,
I wonder what it's gonna be like when I go through a recession. You know,
yeah.
some people maybe say that COVID wasn't a recession or whatever. It felt like a recession to me, like because I went from
Well,
like making a bunch to zero. You know?
listen, I think from a lot of professions, it was a recession.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, think about what it did to professional athletics. Remember, I still have the visuals of watching baseball games with empty stadiums and
Right.
watching college football games. So it affected a ton of people, but it does speak pretty awesomely to like the American spirit, how quickly the economy and everything kind of bounced back from it. I really thought we were going to have another recession like we did in '08, quite honestly,
Yeah.
and I thought it would be 2 or 3 years that we were going to be, struggling, and it just wasn't that.
Yeah. Um, I left the label probably around like around like November or something of 2019, and then COVID hit like March of 2020, and I basically was kind of just floating
Yeah,
for like a year. I had like little knick-knack like jobs kind of here and there that were like paying me or whatever, but that was basically the vibe. And then kind of out of nowhere, like I got brought like the club deal, like the Off Sunset deal, where I became
yeah,
like a partner in it, and that opened like August of 2021, and that was like a huge hit. And it was just like crazy because my goal like before I was at the record label was to become a nightclub owner originally. That was like what I
hmm
was like trying to do. And then it just didn't happen. And then I got hired at the label randomly. I wasn't even trying to work in music. And then I leave the label and then I ended up becoming a nightclub owner. So like I feel like weird way of working out, but that was like one example, I guess, of where I was like on a crazy high and then it like
Yeah.
crazy low and then at like crazy higher even more. So
So how do you envision the next few years with your businesses now? I mean, obviously, you talk about a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan. Like, where are you at now, and where are you hoping to go?
yeah, so right now, I basically have a few different like consulting clients. I do like events, obviously, like in the political, like government space, and then I manage like a few different artists and stuff like that. So I would say like now, now feels like I have a name. One of the hardest things about leaving the label for me was you don't have that at you music email address anymore. So people aren't responding to you
Sure,
as much. You don't have
sure.
armor. I have my own armor now. I have my own press. People know my name. I would just say like right now I don't have like a white hot hit. I'm kind of just like in a medium like kind of lull area, but it's not bad, but it's not hot either. It's just kind of cruising
Right.
and like in the mix. I have some things going on. Like but I don't know really what the next hit will be. But I do know that like based on I don't know the past like 14 years or whatever of my career, something will probably come about like in the next like 6 months or a year if I had to take.
For other people, you kind of need to have that plan and that vision. They need to kind of know what's next, what's next. You've proven clearly from back to your 10-year-old your 10-year-old self that you
Yeah,
don't necessarily need to know what the next thing is. Whatever presents itself to you, or whatever you're confident enough, you're enough of a risk taker. I think that they're all components of it. I think it's a combination of risk tolerance and confidence that you're okay. I see an opportunity, or I think of an opportunity, and I'm just going to run with it and see what happens.
yeah. My life's non-linear,
Right.
so it's like, but I do know each year typically like I do get bigger, so it's
Yeah.
easier to recognize it now and to kind of stay the course. It was a lot harder when I was younger dealing with like the highs and lows, but it's not for everyone, it's and it's hard to explain to people as well. If people especially that are unfamiliar
Yeah.
kind of with like the
Well,
entrepreneur culture and stuff like that.
I think the biggest part of it is, and we talked about it before, is failure.
Yeah.
I think not being afraid to fail.
Yeah.
I think people who don't take risk not because of they don't want the benefits of the risk.
Right.
They're afraid of the negative, and that's the failure.
Yeah.
So you being able to accept failure and not being afraid of failure, to me, puts you at such an advantage over so many people.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to really have a stomach for it. It's like
Right.
it's kind of I feel like one of the hardest parts of it is staying the course when you're like kind of walking through the unknown. Elon or someone like that had some sort of quote where it's like walking through like a misty like tunnel and you're like walking on glass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's what being an entrepreneur is like.
Well, a lot of my entertainment clients and so forth, especially like in the acting area. I
Yeah.
mean, if you can't handle rejection and self-criticism and stuff like that, you get rejected, 9 times out of 10 for the one hit.
Yeah, yeah.
So you got to be okay to fail, and you not getting a job doesn't mean you failed. It just means someone else succeeded, and then that's the approach and the mindset I think you have to take is all right, maybe you didn't get a gig, or maybe someone's being represented by someone else, not because you failed, just because someone else was what they were looking for.
Yeah. My experience with being an entrepreneur, it kind of feels like being an actor and you're kind of just like waiting for your next role, like or like
Yep.
in a movie or something. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm at the point in my career where I've been like in some hit movies and I've had my parts and
Yeah.
some movies have bombed at the box office and some were some smaller indie movies that I didn't even think twice about and that ended up being a bigger hit than what I thought was going to be the bigger hit, but
Right.
I'm kind of just
And your biggest hit might hit next year, might hit
yeah,
10
yeah,
years from
yeah.
now. And I forget some of the Kentucky Fried Chicken guy didn't invent KFC until he was 53, and
Right.
this person didn't hit it big until they were 57. So you're obviously a young guy and you've had successes. So you have so much more of a window to even have more successes and bigger successes.
That's like the hardest thing to imagine because at least like I've had like some I guess like things to point to. So I'm like, okay, like I'm not crazy. You know what I mean? Because that's the hardest part when you're like in the lull and then you're like, oh, like maybe I peaked out when I was younger or maybe this.
Right,
Like,
right.
imagine you don't have anything to point to and you're just like walking through that tunnel and then at like 60 you do Kentucky Fried Chicken and it's like
Yeah.
yeah, that's got to be insane.
It kind of the point you just made kind of goes to children actors. It goes to maybe athletes. You know, let's just say you stuck with judo. Let's just say you became a champion at 14 or 15, and judo kind of ends there. Have you hit your peak? And it's unfortunate people who hit their peak at 15, and
Yeah.
hopefully it's someone like you who's not afraid to go into new areas and embrace new challenges and accept failures and stuff like that. Because you would think the KFC guy had his share of failures.
Yeah.
And then finally had his big hit.
That's dark. The thing that people don't tell you about too, like, is the hardest part about it too. It's not you sometimes. It's like the people that love you are that's what hurts. Where it's like family members or girlfriends or boyfriends or like people are like asking these questions. It's like, hey, like you've been doing this now for a couple years. Like, what's going on? It's all fine and dandy when everything's working, but when the venue closes or the artist isn't working with you anymore, people like after a second are like, what's going on? Like,
why, you know?
Yeah.
And when you talk about risk sensitivity, why are people sometimes, risk averse? It's because of their family too. I don't want to let them down. I have to pay the bills. I need to, if you have kids, I need to make sure there's, college money, whatever it may be. So, yeah, I think that circle of influence around you, as positive it can be, obviously comes with the negative side as well.
Yeah.
As I read earlier, you obviously represent artists, you have the events. The other thing you talk about on your website is you kind of help them develop, strategies and successes. How do you work with someone, or how do you help identify an approach that's going to work for maybe me, but the next person you're dealing with might need a totally different philosophy?
Yeah. I try to talk to them first and figure out what they want, because each artist or person is different, right? Because it's like, maybe some people want to be as big as Justin Bieber, but then some people are just like, hey, I want to be like a local, like super cred act that everyone respects, but like I don't want to be like super famous. So I try to figure out first like what they want. Like, sometimes there's, DJs where I saw some of their music and I think it's sick, and then they're like, hey, I actually don't want to do a bunch of touring and shows. I want to get more like placed in like commercials and movies and stuff because I have a wife, and
I don't want to be traveling. I want to be in LA and only LA.
Yeah. So I try to, for one, figure out like what do they want to become, like what type of artist or person like is a reference point for them.
Yeah.
I figure out like who they have worked with, who they want to work with, all that type of stuff, and get a vibe. And then I usually just like put together a list, but I try to pitch myself more as like a toolkit for helping them. Like I'm for the most part not the type of person that's in the studio, and then on top of that, I'm definitely not the type of person in the studio where I'm like, you need to like make this type of music or you need to do that. Like I don't.
Yeah.
I let them do their thing, and then I just try to help amplify it. That's like more my approach.
I think it's a great approach. You can't force around whole,
the horse to the water or whatever. Yeah.
You find out what they want. I'll call you an advisor, manager, whatever you want to use. I think you want to help them achieve their goals.
Yeah.
And maybe help them frame their goal, but to try and make someone be something they're not, that might work short term. But at the end of the day, if they're not happy, ideally they're going to move on to something that they're passionate about and what they love. And I think when you're dealing with artists and entertainers, I think 90% of their success is based upon their passion.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, the most famous people in the world are not the most talented.
Yeah, it just kind of depends on like what you want to do. Like if you want to put out like super pop like commercial songs and you just want to be like the biggest possible, or if you really want to lean into that like tastemaker, critical acclaim lane and
Yeah, you see it in films. Like, do I want to try and make the $100 million mega blockbuster that's an awful movie?
Yeah.
Or do I want to make that critically acclaimed indie film?
Yeah. Yeah, so I've worked with all types of artists, I guess, in that sense. But yeah, that's kind of my approach. I try to ask questions first before I go into like my opinion or what I can do or this or that.
Yeah, so your Instagram is the Connor Treacy.
Treacy,
That's
yeah.
Treacy.
Yeah.
And your website?
Is just connortracy.com.
Well, it's in reverse. Remember, Facebook used to be called The Facebook until they cut off the. So you used to be Connor Treacy, now you're The Connor Treacy.
Yeah,
Nothing wrong with that.
Yep, that's how the cookie crumbles.
Awesome. Listen, real pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
Hope your success continues, and appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, no, for sure. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On-Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.